All right, we are live, folks. We are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. While we wait to give people a chance to arrive, get LinkedIn, get set up for tonight's roundtable, I would love for everybody to join me and let me know where you're from. Use the chat box. And as we're allowing folks to come in, I'll allow my panelists to get comfortable because soon I'll be tagging you in. As we are setting up for tonight, as we know, there are a few disclaimers I have to do as a function of this platform. So as we're doing that, and again, waiting for everybody to get in here, I just want to say hello. Interestingly enough, I come to you from the Buckeye State this year. Many of you who've joined us before know that I cannot sit still for some reason. So sometimes I visited you from Michigan, sometimes I visited you from Kentucky, and today I just happen to be in Ohio. All right, so let's get started with our lovely disclaimers. This is the live stream, and it is intended to serve as an educational space, okay? This is not intended to be therapy or therapeutic in any way. We'd like to inform folks and let them know. So for the sake of treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. Because the IOCDF is not a crisis hotline or a space where we can manage crises clinically, we will want you to use the resources that are available to all of us. So if you are in a crisis and you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the suicide prevention hotline. That's 1-800-273-8255. We also want to make sure, again, because this is a safe space, that we want to be kind and respectful to everyone, okay? So what does that look like? This is a broadcast, so this is going across various social media platforms. Why do we say such? Oh, and also it's being recorded. So please be mindful that it is perfectly okay to ask personal questions. It's perfectly okay to share personal experiences or even leave comments. But note that this is social media. So because of that, various folks have access to this information. And again, we want to foster a safe space, but of course, there are limitations to that. So please be mindful. If you're asking questions, share personal experiences, know that this is captured out in the cosmos of social media, okay? All right, I'm gonna move over to the comments. I always follow the private chat. We have to go back and forth. All right, so let's get started, shall we? Welcome everyone to the IOCDF Diversity Roundtable. I am your moderator, Darlene Davis-Goodwine. This, you all, is our first pre-conference recap. What a wonderful idea to bring all of you lovely folks in this space to talk about your experiences at the conference. I attended, and so everyone who is in attendance today, physically in person. However, we would love to hear from folks who were not able to make it. We would love to address questions. Keep in mind, everyone is speaking from their experience, from how they saw it. And so with the recap, I want to bring your attention to three things we'll cover. We're going to talk about the content of the conference. We're going to talk about the advocacy, because as we know in this space, we are all about advocacy and action. We're talking about diversity as an action term, not as a concept, not as awareness, not as information. We are all about action. All right, and then we're going to get some perspective. So we wanted to create as many opportunities for different voices that make up the IOCDF community to be present. Obviously, we cannot, well, not obviously, I should say that way. Today, we are not able to have a platform or host a platform even for everybody, but we would love to hear your comments and let your voice be heard. Speak up, okay? In the spirit of creating a safe space, there are a few agreements that we will introduce into the space, okay? So we know that a traditional diversity discussion space is all about awareness, sharing information. As I said before, we are here to move the needle towards action. So that's making change and actually being the change. So in doing so, we will honor the following agreements. Hold a space where differing perspectives are respected. Model effective ways to have difficult dialogue around topics of diversity, differences, and to take action steps towards enacting change, okay? So with our solid foundation in this mission, to foster a helpful, hopeful, supportive environment around OCD, and our agreement that we center with our respect and modeling effective communication, I believe it's time for us to get into our conversation. Now, this is where we get the honor of hearing from our esteemed panelists who are here this evening to share their experiences with the conference. Now, if I have a few new folks on my panel, so this is how we do this thing. We kind of jump in there. This is very much a conversational thing. As I am talking now, this is how I hope to pull you in and model how we have these conversations. For my pros who've been here before, you know how we do. We just kind of dig in there, get in there, and we just share what we want to share. Obviously, I'm here to moderate in the way that we just kind of move the conversation along because we only have an hour together. And while I enjoy this hour, and many of our conversations can really go on forever, we got to kind of keep it moving for the folks who want to join us. All right. So, who would like to start out by sharing who you are, your identities, whatever you're comfortable sharing, how long you've been engaged in the IOCDF community, anything interesting, and then if you want to kind of pin or plug your social media or any programs or projects you're doing, feel free to do so. So you're going to see me mute often because this is your platform, and I'm just going to go off of here and let you guys take over.
Well, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or this evening, depending where you are. I'm so grateful to be part of this panel. I think it's so very important. My name is Valerie Andrews. I'm a lead advocate. I've been involved with the foundation since 2017. Currently, I have a nonprofit that is called Miss Mabel Sparrows, which is geared toward women of color and of age and of faith. And I also have a special interest group called Vintage Voices that works with us being older and having OCD. So thank you for showing up today.
I'll jump in. My name is Amanda Oda. I'm a member of the IOCDF staff. I'm actually our communications manager at the IOCDF. I identify as a Japanese American woman, and I've been with the IOCDF for about 8 months, so I'm very thrilled to be here today. I'm usually on the other side of these live streams, so very grateful to be a panelist today and to be here with all of you.
Oh, welcome, Amanda. You might be the baby.
Well, my name is Ella Elliott. I proudly identify as an African American. I have been to 6 IOCDF conferences so far, I believe, and I plan to attend many, many more. And this is my first time at the roundtable, so thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I'm Alex. I'm the less cool Alex. The more cool Alex is about to speak. But I do a lot of work with the International OCD Foundation, especially regarding faith and mental health via my experiences with Jewish faith. And I'm happy to be here. This is also, I've been to quite a few conferences, but this is my first time on this roundtable, so I'm very excited.
He said he saved the best for the last hour.
So much pressure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I disagree. I think Alex Rosenberg is the coolest Alex there is. I mean, he has an award, which is just amazing, and I do not. So there you go. The awards have it. Anyway, I am an IOCDF advocate. I think I've been doing work with the foundation for about 2 years now, maybe a little bit less. I'm not sure. It's been such a whirlwind. I've been to 2 conferences now, and it has been such a joy, and I plan to go to many more. I do a lot of work specifically within the kind of Latino, BIPOC, marginalized communities realm. I am non-binary. I am bisexual. I am also Puerto Rican. So all of those intersections and how they show up are such a huge part of my advocacy, and I'm so excited to be here.
And I am just little old Darlene Davis Goodwine. I am just so excited to be here. I am in this space as a clinician, and I also started in this space as a graduate student. So I participated in recent IOCD, specifically in the Black community. So when I'm not in the space of a moderator, I am absolutely advocating for quality and access to mental health resources, specifically in the area of OCD for Black folks. Like, that's pretty much all I'll talk about. The adaptation of the ERP and evidence-based practices and interventions, and then just creating a space for that. So because of our shared experience in the conference, I thought it would be useful to have a balanced voice. I know that as I'm looking at you all, some of you presented, some of you didn't. Some of you each have your own roles. I know that there are some folks who are on the diversity committee, some who are not, some who are active advocates, some who are not, some who are, as Amanda said, in the brown. I don't kind of know where I fit, but I don't think that's relevant because you all are talking. Because of that, I thought it would be super helpful to hear for this particular panel, this roundtable, to share the experiences as you engage and experience the content of the conference. One of the things that has been a part of the conversation as I've navigated this space as a student, researcher, clinician, presenter, moderator, things, is that diversity. Diversity has been at the forefront of what IOCDF has been intentional about over the years. And as we know in the diversity space, sometimes it's a slow growth, like a real slow growth. And then sometimes there are often setbacks where we feel like things happen or situations have occurred through social spaces where we come to this community, it's like, that was hell, in this community. So I wanted to use this time to speak to how each of you individually, because we know that as different races and different groups are not a monolith, the diversity voice is also not a monolith. So I want you to speak to, in this particular area, about the content, what topics you enjoyed, and maybe what topics that you think, hey, it would have been nice to see this, or where you feel like there's space for more attention to particular content. And when I say topic, I mean all the events. So some of you who may not know, like the conference has a number of events for all of the attendees, whether you're a clinician, whether you're with OCD, whether you're with a family. So it's so many, unlike any other conference. So I want you all to speak to that. Tell me from your experience, like how you felt about this year's conference. And please stop being shy, y'all. We might need to unmute yourself so we can just talk. Get here, y'all.
I think for me, my first impression when I got there was, oh, this is so wonderful, especially because I'm from the West Coast. Also, so I was already excited that people were coming to my side of the world. But then when I started going through the programming, I was a little disappointed. I think we're lacking in visual context, as just seeing different faces. I think I was disappointed that there was not a lot of panels as a Black woman to choose from. And also a person of age. Also, I was disappointed that there were one or two groups that was offered for those individuals. And I do think it was much better than before. I've seen it grow over the years, so that's a plus. But I was still hoping for more diverse topics, more individual specific topics just for, maybe the Black community. Because like you said, even though we're in a diverse group, they're still diverse within the group. And so those were the two kind of disappointments. I was disappointed and also encouraged at the same time to see that they're growing and that we're being included. And especially since I've been involved since 2017, I can see the difference. My first year, to be honest, when I went to the conference, which was in San Francisco 5 years ago, I could probably count the number of people on my hands that were Black or people of color. I couldn't do that this year. So I was very encouraged by that. So those were the two things that I focused on primarily this year.
Thank you for sharing. And I appreciate the balanced nature of it too. It was like, this is what was disappointing, but I'm also encouraged. And not that anybody has to share that sentiment, but I just wanted to say that because I had a similar experience as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think in this format, it's important to be as transparent, as I can as an individual, because that's how growth and change happens. So
that's why
I'm going to be totally honest.
That's why you're here. All right, Tag, who else is next?
I'll jump in. So very much like Val, I haven't been around nearly as long as Val, but just from my first in-person conference last year at Denver, I will say that I saw so many more diverse faces, at least in the audience, in the crowd, and that made me really, really happy. I think I could count literally on maybe one or two hands how many folks I saw of color at the Denver conference. And it was actually really amazing to me how many more people of color I saw in San Francisco. I mean, I even ran into a group of Puerto Ricans and we got to speak Spanish, and it was really, really fun and nice. And I think people don't realize how much more welcoming it makes that environment when you find people who you intersect with on many different, identities versus just one or two. I kind of like Val, I was a little disappointed with the choice in panels, and it's not anyone's fault. I think the IOCDF is doing a really amazing job at bringing more diversity. It's just such slow growth, and that can feel really hard. I get impatient. One thing I will say is that I was disappointed to see certain things like the justice-based ERP being spoken about from a very white, cis hetero lens. I would love to see diverse folks presenting on these, important topics that affect us. I would like to see our people, our identities being uplifted, our voices being uplifted in those situations, not white people's. And that's not to say I don't love white people, because I do, but I think that we should be lifting up marginalized people's voices, not seizing those topics for ourselves.
Yes. So you and I were, so one of the things that Alex did not mention is that she facilitated and presented on one of the, I would argue, is one of the most successful BIPOC panels ever. And I'll tell you why. Not just because I was the moderator, because I really didn't say that much, y'all, to be honest. But it spoke to the different, I'll use the term the different flavors of culture, in the way that if you understand OCD as it manifests as an experience, as a diagnosis, as it shows up, you get to see how important it is. And we use the term so loosely, like, oh, be culture, like understand diversity, understand culture. It's like, no, if you understand OCD, you get to see how extremely important it is to be able to speak to the cultural experiences of each individual client. Does that mean you are tasked with going out here and learning about every single body? Absolutely not. That is completely unreasonable. It is completely unfair. And as a person having gone through a PhD program, I promise you, it's completely impossible. So let's go ahead and give yourself permission to not take that task. What I will say that even I learned in being on the panel is that, wow, how significant and important is it to just create a space for dialogue? That when you are doing your assessment, when you as a clinician are conceptualizing in your mind, start asking yourself, if I have not considered the true intricacy of a person's culture, and it's not just race or ethnicity. Trust me, as a person who speaks about the Black community, you're gonna hear me just go ahead and ring the race bell as many times as I can, because that's my particular focus. But when I treat Black people, that is, I mean, it's like one thing, but when I tell you about the Black experience, it is intricate. And so if I learn nothing about that, and even speaking to the disease ERP or whatever the topic was, I think there is space for expansion. I personally, in my space, well, professionally, I don't say personally, professionally doing diversity work and doing cultural humility work, I think there needs to be white people speaking on this, because some of these white people are not listening to Black people or brown people or Jewish, like they're just not listening to those other voices. So there is a space where that is necessary for just the sake of the field. And to your point, as you said earlier, lifting up and making space for the voice of both and trying to strike that balance, I think is where IOCDF will continue to do the work in the way that many institutions are. It's like we want to strike that balance. It does not have to be either or. It's not either they're doing it or they're doing it. No, no, no. Let's create the fullness of the experience, because there's something fruitful about hearing about this experience from the white lens. It's just that having the non-white lens, we know we get it all the time. And so equally having that balanced perspective, I think is super ideal. Any thoughts about that, Alex? I that's in no way meant to invalidate. I hope it doesn't. I hope it's
No, it doesn't.
Of it. Okay, great.
It doesn't at all. I actually really love that. And yeah, I think that having a more balanced perspective would be honestly ideal. It would be perfect, right? Yeah. So when we plan these things, when we, create these panels, when we do these things, having a little bit of both so that we have that full, rich experience, like you said, would be ideal, because we do need more white people to be invested in it. We do need people to be, kind of buying into it. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere. But we also want to make sure that we are uplifting the right people and making sure that their voices are being heard and that we're not unintentionally kind of leaving them out.
Yeah. I have a question. I'm wondering, maybe a takeaway from this is that, you look at a bunch of different conference proposals, you look at the different titles, you see a title, there are very different ways that different people will do a talk, even based on the same title. And so thinking that maybe one of the things and one of the strategies that we could potentially look into going forward is putting a lot of emphasis not just on what the title of the talk is, but what the content of the talk is and who is speaking. I don't want to necessarily, make very hard limits about these are the people, we should let speak about these issues. But I do think we also should try to make it to have some diversity, maybe even to have different people of different perspectives be kind of coordinating these talks together. So these are just a few things I'm thinking about. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll speak to that particular thing because I think, honestly, I think you're onto something. And I think that connects with the staff, not being the staff. I'm not the staff, but I know that folks sought me out. Honestly, that's why I was on the panel. So I know that Stephanie, you don't know Stephanie Cohen. I know that having been in the background for her for many, many years, I know that's something that IOCDF intentionally does. I think, to Alex's point, while there's great work to be done, it's just slow, and sometimes we're not able to pool, right? You're only so limited. So I think, to your point, Alex, this Alex over here who just spoke, I think hearing it and having that said on and reiterated on this panel, I think is super helpful. And even letting it go out to the community to say, hey, folks, get out here and collaborate, right? Yeah. It is very possible to create that balance within the talk, because it is hard to know, who's going to do what. You're just banking on, we hope this topic resonates with folks. But community, IOCDF community, please collaborate. Yeah. I know that, one last thing, and then I'm going to let you talk. I know that one of the things that is intentional about this particular conference is they like to see folks who live with OCD on panels with providers and things like that. So if we can extend that and stretch that out to create that balance across identities, I think that'd be great. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and something that was great for me, as a part of the talk that I was doing, one of my panelists was speaking for the first time and had dealt with pretty difficult learning disabilities, which is, it's the first time I've worked with, I think, in a while, a panelist with his particular circumstances, and it was just unbelievable. And so I think the kind of, in a lot of ways, some of these niches that we're personally passionate about, for me, especially the faith groups and the special interest group, a lot of these are really growing. Unfortunately, it's kind of tricky because sometimes, it's growing faster, sometimes it's growing a little bit slower. But I think that's something that as you said, it could be very big for us, is to try to get voices from these communities, and to really get people speaking for their first times, and get new faces on the scene. Because I know that there are a lot of people who kind of like, there are a lot of people who are like, look, if there are vacancies, I can help fill them. But, we also want to get new people with new and, different experiences. And so I think the goal is to really grow. And through that growing, we get a lot more perspectives and diversity.
Absolutely. Alex, you couldn't have said it any better, which is why I'm so glad you're here, and which is a nice segue. And a minute, I don't want to shortchange you, but I think it's a wonderful segue to get on over to Ella, who is also the first time, who has the experience, but who's the first time, as Alex is on this Alex who just spoke. And Ella, they're the first time, this is the first time they've joined the roundtable. So I agree with you. So Ella, tell us about your experience.
Honestly, if I were to sum it up, I would just say, wow. I've been going to these conferences for a while now, and the amount of diversity, the amount of support groups for BIPOC this year just absolutely blew my mind. Was it several? No, but it was more than last year and the year before that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Something that I struggle so much with is community and seeing myself in other people, especially when you have OCD. And so this year I went to so many of the BIPOC talks. I'm going to put you on the spot, Valerie, for a moment, and just say that your story, when you were presenting, just resonated so deeply with mine. So I felt so much more welcome this year, and there were so many more things for young adults to do. And it was amazing to see how many young adults were actually at the conference, because a lot of the time, it's people that are older, when, we're kind of put in this gray zone in our 20s and 30s where we're trying to figure ourselves out, we're trying to figure the world out. And then you add a mental illness on top of that, and where do we go from there? So for me, the conference was really just a compass to kind of sort myself out and find out what I needed to do to grow as a person. All of that being said, one part that I did find quite difficult was some of the conversations that I was overhearing people have after the panels for the people of color. I am very sad to say that I did hear a few people make some very negative comments about it with the panels that didn't actually have white people on them. So I am sad that some of the understanding and community and love that is in the talks does not necessarily extend out of the room. I am not entirely sure how we could remedy that. That was something that really stuck out to me. I didn't articulate this very well, but.
No, you did amazing.
Yes, you did.
Absolutely. Yes. No. I think you summed it up without, acknowledging the space we're in and how much time we have. And, you focused on the main point, which was, there's obviously still room for growth. And I think that's the running thing. And that, maybe what's contributing slow is that it's not translating to the folks outside of the room, right? It's kind of the phrase of preaching to the choir, like the folks in the room, get it, but we want to extend it to the folks outside of the room. And so I appreciate that contribution. And I think, which is, again, a nice segue to Amanda, who's in the background, who gets to tell us all the background deets. I think just this voice and this space and this opportunity, as both of the Alexes have shared, as Valerie has shared, it speaks to, the voice that you have in your experience. And we are continuing to do the work that we're doing. So please never apologize. You did very well. All right, Amanda, tag, you're it.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate and acknowledge what's been said. And I think that there is so much room for growth. And I'm so glad that this is a safe space where we can talk about that. And I just want to really underscore that we value so much those opinions. And I think what was really amazing for me to see, it was my first year at the conference attending. So I was just so encouraged by, I know the progress is slow, but seeing that slow progress come to fruition. I think that the offerings that we had this year, I personally was just very moved to see what we put out. And I think that it's just encouraging to see that we're dedicated to doing more. And I think that, there's urgency in our voices when we're talking about the need for more. And I think that we can see an expansion of this moving forward. So I'm really optimistic about what's to come.
Which is a nice segue into our A for our recap, which is our advocacy. So let's acknowledge why we saw the diversity, because I too had the similar experience. Now, I'll put into context, as I know, because I've been here like a while and kind of moving around. Location does add to like kind of who shows up. I was surprised to not see the more Californian and my East Coast limited understanding of who's over here, because I don't come over here that often. I was surprised to not see more representation of at least the California identities as much as I thought I would. And maybe I was blinded. Maybe I don't know what I'm looking for. But to that point, the reason I brought that up is because what we're seeing and what we're experiencing now is the direct result of advocacy. So that is why this is our A for our recap, okay? Talked about the content. We are in the sheer space of advocacy, and I would love to turn it over to our advocates to speak to, what development you saw in that space, and then to my first timers, share just kind of, what it was like to see the advocacy in action if you were able to see it. Go ahead, guys.
Well, I know for me, especially like you say, you spoke of the West Coast, and going back what was said previously, I think a lot of it comes down to money. I got a lot of feedback from people, quote, everybody can't afford Rogers, end quote, and also I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, quote, this feels like a rich person's conference. That was the feedback I got, even though California is expensive, and people,
We lost her for a second. So who wants to begin until she comes back? We're speaking about advocacy.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'll jump in until Val comes back. I think from my perspective, I saw some really positive things on the advocacy end. I know that I had a couple of clinicians who came up to me and said, I'm not going to tell you who, obviously, but I have, some patients from your culture who came to the conference just because of you. And I mean, okay, that's like a scary feeling, right? And I'm kind of like emotional about it right now because I haven't even processed everything from the conference. But it made me feel so good that somebody wanted to come because they saw themselves. They saw themselves represented. They saw their culture represented in some way. And they felt like that gave them more of an avenue to become involved, And so that felt really good because I don't want to be the only Latina. I want there to be 20 of us. And it felt amazing to be able to provide that representation for people, because that's all I really wanted when I started advocating. And so in that sense, I felt like it was really, really successful. I also got to make really great connections with people back in, who live in Puerto Rico, my homeland, to hopefully get some things off the ground there. So it's not just about what's happening here in the States, it's about the connections that we're making to actually take this, international, even though Puerto Rico is a US territory, but still, we start somewhere. And I think that's really, really beautiful. Overall, I saw so many more folks who seem to feel represented, especially after our panel, Val. You know, even if it wasn't necessarily translating fully outside of the room yet, just to know that folks felt seen, that they felt heard, that they finally felt represented was a good feeling. And, you know, I will agree with the comments that, you know, you had the feedback. It can feel like a rich person's conference. You know, it can. It's not always accessible. I will say that the IOCDF has done great in having the virtual conference to, you know, increase accessibility. Those conferences just unfortunately are not cheap. And no, not everyone can afford Rogers. We don't all have the same, you know, path in advocacy. And I think when folks are looking at us, at the advocates, sometimes they think we all have taken that same path because one certain path is more represented than others. But we all come from, you know, diverse backgrounds and diverse blocks of ERP. I know I never went to inpatient. I probably should have, but I couldn't afford it. I had to find a doctor who was willing to take me on for $100 an hour,
Right.
you know, and I had a tab with him. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I owed him so much money for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to him. But, you know, we can all offer hope to different people, and we can all get better no matter where we come from.
And I think that's why the representation truly, truly matters. And I think that's why we're linking and really anchoring ourselves in this advocacy. Is this is being a part of our particular recap. One of the things, so we have a comment in our comment section that was actually part of this particular space around advocacy, that if you have time, will you touch on the location of the conference? I wonder if there's a way to offer, oh no, that's a different one, sorry. If you have time, will you touch on the location of the conference next year? I'm having a hard time meshing the progress IOCDF is making with holding the conference in Florida. So let me see, 1, 2, 3 of us was in a conversation specifically about that. And I know that Amanda had planned to speak specifically to this. So for the sake of time, I will offer Amanda out first and then give the other panelists a chance to speak and kind of rise what your thoughts were about the Florida experience. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that there's been a lot of conversation about our decision to host the conference in Orlando next year. I just want to start by saying that the IOCDF really hears and appreciates the feedback we've been receiving from community members. We're listening and we're grateful for you for sharing your thoughts with us. And, you know, it really came down to our mission, and our mission being to help everyone impacted by OCD and related disorders. And we ultimately relied on this to guide our decision. So when we're coming to this decision, we're coming from that place of our mission and our vision and what we are striving to achieve through those.
So and not to put anybody in the spot, because I can just speak for myself, but would either of you like to speak, those who were in that meeting, would you all like to summarize kind of what your thoughts were, or you want to move on from it?
I can say something as it connects to what we've been talking about with Alex and Val, I think, which is a very big thing and a very big struggle in advocacy is there are some people who don't have, you know, all the resources that, for instance, I am very fortunate to have.
Privilege.
And one of the important, privilege, and also money, which is also privilege, I guess. You know, various different types of resources, even, you know, good clinicians, which is another kind of privilege. And what I think is important for me as an advocate personally, you know, my mission is really, there were a lot of times in my life where I didn't know that my life would be able to get better, and I had no idea how to move forward. And other people came in and gave me, you know, the resources and the means to be able to kind of take that step. You know, even though I had so much, you know, I was very fortunate to have so many of these people to help me, but I really needed it and mostly needed, you know, the support. And I think there are a lot of people who don't have these resources. And my goal as an advocate is to be able to provide these resources for people to be able to take their own lives back, to get autonomy and feel the sense of control and hope. There's so many ways of doing this: spreading hope, spreading messaging, funding, many different approaches. One thing that I think is what was important to quite a few people in the diversity meeting about being in Florida is there are a lot of people that live in Florida who are dealing with a lot of challenges with OCD. And this is a very large number, according to quite a few people statistically. And of some of these people, for instance, they face a lot of challenges, in some cases discrimination, in some cases lack of resources. And some of these people may not be able to travel, for instance, all the way, from the East Coast to the West Coast. Not to mention that traveling on a plane, for instance, is very difficult for someone with OCD in many cases. And so part of, I think, what's important about this is it's been a long time since we've had a conference in that region of the US. It's been, I think, like 10 years ago. It's been so long ago that I didn't actually have OCD the last time this happened. It was like a year before my initial onset. And so I think that that's one of the considerations people are weighing. At the same time, something that we are very passionate about is taking steps to make this safe and a safe space, and to really take specific and particular measures regarding the upcoming conference in Florida.
So Alex, I actually would prefer to stop there, because I think that is the messaging as we think through what you shared in totality about the access, the resources, the mission. I think that what has been the conversation is around acknowledging the safety that is part of advocacy for the groups impacted, as well as trying to address all the needs of the entire community. Remember, like kind of thing I said earlier was like, a lot of these various groups are not monoliths. Our IOCDF community is not a monolith either, right? And so one of the things that I personally experienced in that diversity meeting that kind of left me on the fence was that, like, it is hard, as Alex is saying, to balance, like, being in that role and wanting to, and trying to support everybody across the board. And so there are a lot of difficulties around thinking through a way to meet the needs of all the community participants, right? Like, how do I honor the LGBTI community? How do I honor the individuals in the space who need the support in Florida? How do I honor and address, and this is why I wanted to stop where you were at, address the concerns and the safety of all parties involved, no matter if you are in Florida, or if you're traveling to Florida, or if you're deciding to stay out of Florida. Like, all of those voices are present in our IOCDF community. And I think it's super important for us to find a way to address all that. And so, Bob, if you have anything to say, I'll let you squeeze in here in a second, and then we can kind of try and
that's definitely a key. That's the key matter, I think. Definitely.
Yes, the safety, right? So I think what I would do here in this space right now is I would encourage, and Amanda, you can tap my hand if you want to, but I would encourage everyone to lift their voice with their concerns, because I will say, at least at the conference, when we did the keynote, the board member, the board president, I think it was, she got up there and acknowledged it, and he did a very good job of speaking to it and trying, like, to not hide behind, or like, we're in the conference, we're not going to address this. No. Let's all talk about everybody's concern. So I think that is a representation of how IOCDF is a bit trying to manage this. Speak up, have the voices heard, share your concerns, so that we can make sure that we can address the concerns of all parties involved, and understand that it is an ongoing process, because everyone's voice deserves to be heard. The people who are there in Florida, who need the support and access, the people who don't want to come to Florida because and it's me. I am one of the people who should not be going to Florida. But I am balancing, like Ella said, like, what does it mean to have a Black face in the crowd? Like, oh my, like, that's my own personal, like, issue. So yeah, Val, did you have anything to say?
Oh, yes. I'm glad the topic is being discussed, because for me as a lead advocate, I do hold, I think, a different responsibility to go and show up. But as a Black woman and someone who when I gave my talk in our shoes, I laid everything on the table. I tried to be so transparent because I'm just at this age, and it was something you said to me, Dr. Darlene, you might not even remember, in Denver. I'm tired of talking about it. It's time to be about it. And I've been on this road a long time. So my perspective, I think, is a little different because my lived experience is different. And I tell you, I had an encounter with a Karen a couple of, well, it's like maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And I was surprised. I'm a very calm person. I don't cuss. I'm very this kind of level person. But when that experience happened, it scared the heck out of me because as soon as it came out of her mouth, it was like I was in her face. And it scared me because I wasn't anticipating that type of reaction, more rational than that in my daily life. But when I was confronted of being Black and not waiting my turn as it was, it kind of made me wake up in a sense that all of this experience that we carry with us, including with the OCD, I'm going to take to Florida with me. And so I'm on the border, especially just happening to see DeShante just did an interview that I watched before coming on here, referring to us still as rogue individuals and wanted to give Trump a pass, but you want to call me rogue for protesting the murder of George Floyd. It's a lot to deal with. So I'm torn with the responsibility. Where's my responsibility as a Black woman living with OCD, living with all of this experience, all of these factors, and then having to be the lead advocate, to go to Florida because I know, people need help. But my first expression, I think, to be honest, was when we were talking about Florida, I was like, oh, well, too bad. It's one of 50 states. Are you going to say that when it comes time to go to Chicago? So
it's so
I'm just
funny.
trying to be honest. I think these are so important. I will be there because bottom line, it goes back to what you were saying. It's so important for people to see us live and in person. So for that reason, I will be there. But to be honest,
1 second, because I don't want you to close. I don't want you to close. Stay right there. Don't close. Because I want you to close after we acknowledge this thing that you said. That, and it's come up in the Bridget, I think it's Bridget, I'm assuming it's Bridget, because that's my pronunciation. If I murdered it, Bridget, please pick up. But Bridget at 646. So Bridget, her commentary, or their commentary is kind of it's going to speak to the narrative of some voices that are out there. And that's why I want to bring it forward as we're talking about this, because you and I are kind of share a similar experience and that we're advocating and we're Black and that kind of thing. But what we haven't spoke of that came up for me in the diversity meeting is all the other identities that are also being challenged and threatened, right? So we are not the only one. And I don't claim to speak for every identity that is challenged that was represented in that diversity meeting. That's what made me shift even, because there is this idea, well, yeah, like the people in Florida is one of 50 plus states, right? So why should we care about Florida? I did have that thought originally. I was like, this one conference, I've been to a gazillion conferences. I'm gonna go to some more conferences afterwards. So agree, people, understand. When I want to highlight and bring forward that your voice is relevant, it matters, that, we want to hear it, and to clearly understand that by moving forward with this does not mean your voice is not relevant and not important. I want it to be an individual experience, and I'm only sharing mine not to convince anyone, but to understand that the thoughts that you're having are valid, they're appropriate, and please feel honored and respected in whatever decision that you make. Because one of the things that we propose, I think, should be moved forward is how do we honor and connect with the community who decides to prioritize their safety while I am sitting here prioritizing advocacy. You and I are not wrong, right or wrong. We are choosing to connect with the value that is our own. And if you decide to not come, I value you too. You are still a part of this community. And I want us to figure out as a community how we are going to support our entire IOCDF community, because nobody is required to come. And we should not judge the people who decide not to come, and we should not judge people who decide to go. Because there is so much work. As Bridget said, there are people all over this United States of America and internationally who do not have the resources, who can't get access, who can't get insurance, who can't get support. So we are in a shared mission here. And I think that's what I hear when I hear IOCDF say, we're trying to follow the mission. I hear you. And so to my community, it is an individual choice, and that what I see myself as doing is more about my collective decision making around who I want to connect with. If I get to meet another Ella, I feel like, and IOCDF can make sure I'm safe, I feel like I was successful. But hear that disclaimer. IOCDF can make sure I'm safe. I just want to understand this is a shared experience. So go ahead and close out, Val.
Oh, I'm sorry. I only brought that up an example of my reaction because it was foreign to me. And to be honest, I'm like, if I go to Florida, it's going to be, don't start now, won't be none. But I know, that might not, and that's not a person I want to be. So for that reason, that's why I was sharing for myself, where I have to really stop and take a look at it. But bottom line, my desire to advocate overrides all of that. That means I got to just stay in my room and lock the door and zip my lip. I'll be there.
Me too. And again, and I'll let anybody else who wants to share chime in, and then we'll close this one out and move on to our last letter of our recap. Hear this from this space. You are honored, whatever your decision is. You are respected, whatever your decision is. Your concerns, your fears, they're valid. No one should invalidate anyone's experiences in this space. This is a space of privilege. I know how much I spent, right? From a financial space, from an identity space, from a safe space, from a community space. So no one should walk away feeling invalidated. Please feel free to voice your concerns and understand that whatever the outcome is, like, that is not at the cost of your concerns and your experience. And that I, on this roundtable, I see you, I hear you, and I validate your concerns. And I hope just opening this dialogue around it is helpful in some way. Did anybody want to have a closing thought before we shift?
I just want to underscore what you said, Darlene, just that everyone's feedback is valuable. And I just think that it's so important to stress that, and it cannot be stressed enough. And I think that one of the things that IOCDF is really doing is that we want to hear from our community to help inform how we show up in Orlando and promote safety and inclusion. And I just want to make a plug that we are welcoming feedback at conference@IOCDF. That's our conference email address. And so we'd love to hear from you, and we hear and appreciate the concerns that are coming in. And we want to value everyone and to make everyone feel heard in this process. So I just want to plug again, it's conference@IOCDF. We'd love to hear the feedback that our community has for us.
And then I just wanted to add one thing. A very weird emotion came up in me when I heard that it's going to be in Florida. And oddly enough, that was betrayal. Because how can the conference be held in Florida? And how do I say this? How can it be in Florida? How can it be supporting one group while the same group of people on the outside don't feel comfortable attending? How can you have it both ways? You sort of can't. And so I just felt oddly betrayed because, yes, the IOCDF is bringing wonderful resources to Florida, but it is also a place that is so full of hate. I don't like the type of I don't like the person that I turn into when I feel threatened. That's not something that I ever want to fully acknowledge. I don't like being put into fight or flight, and it's mostly fight when I'm trying to learn about my mental illness, how to reduce distress caused by my mental illness. You can't really have it both ways, and I just feel I feel so torn because on the one hand, I love the conversations that I have with people when I go to the conference. They are so fulfilling. But at the same time, I don't know if it's worth gambling my safety for that. So I just wanted to add that little piece that I was not expecting
Beautiful.
at all.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. And I don't even know if we'll have maybe we should do some town hall. I don't know. But the reason I say that is because I think it's very validating. And I like your honesty, the specificity with the emotion, the strength of the emotion. I loved all of it because when you said that, people felt heard, right? And people felt seen. And so it's that kind of motivation that when I was about how do we meet the needs of the entire community, I thought specifically about how do we make people feel safe and how do we honor their decision to prioritize their safety over going there, while also, because to me, I'm a firm believer that two things can be true at once, okay? So in the same way that the opposite of this would be a betrayal to the people in Florida, and not that I'm on anybody's side, I'm just giving the both, like carrying both of them, which is what I did in my decision making, like carrying both of them are heavy. So I want to acknowledge that and uplift that particular term because I imagine that a lot of people share that. So as we're thinking about closing, as we're coming into time and we're, again, Ellie, you just laid it out so eloquently about perspective, I would like you all to think about, as a closing comment or closing thought, what you will leave with around your perspective of this particular conference experience from your role, right? So me as a clinician, and somebody said this in the comments, it feels a lot like it's for clinicians. And reading that, I can understand and see that. And I think that's something that we want to bring forward because this is a conference for the full community. And I came in as a student, researcher, and now a clinician, right? And so I've moved through various roles and experiences and I've seen it evolve. But I think the intent behind how IOCDF is set up is supposed to be everybody. So if it's feeling a little imbalanced, I think that messaging we want to put forward because this is a very unique experience for those who live with OCD to experience conference in a way that I promise you, as a researcher and a person who attends conference as a professional, this is happening nowhere else. So if you feel like it's imbalanced to ever share that, I encourage you to reach out to IOCDF because it would seem that IOCDF is trying to strike this healthy balance. And as we know, when something goes up, something might come down. And so if it's getting imbalanced, please share. We definitely want to address that because this is a community for all of us. So if you're thinking about your perspective and the last closing remark you want to share with this community about the conference, about future advocacy, think that through, bring it forward, and then we'll close out from there. I'm about to mute myself. So that means y'all got to jump in.
I'll jump in. So what I want to say about the balance is honestly, as a person with lived experience who would also like to in the future be a clinician, is I really do think that the conference is very balanced. I think that there's lots for children. There's lots for people with lived experience. There are lots of straight advocacy panels. There are lots of activities. And then there are things that are geared more toward clinicians. But part of what makes the conference so amazing is that mix, right? When you have both coming together, which is something that no other community has, I don't think. It's like this really beautiful space to learn and push yourself and, just push your boundaries in a really good way. And you don't have to only see panels with lived experience. You can also get a taste of what the clinicians are learning. Like you're not forbidden, from mixing and mingling. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. As far as advocacy goes, I don't even know. I have so many mixed emotions right now being a queer person, and just thinking about the fact that my, queer brothers and sisters and, non-binary folks and trans folks, we are literally not safe. And so I just would like to see the community embrace us and lift up our voices more and find ways to keep us safe.
I hear you. I value that. Go ahead. Who's going to go? I just wanted to affirm you, Alex.
Yeah, I think something that I really love about these conferences is they have in many ways given me a lot of perspective. I think with a lot of these issues, you know, some of these things that I'm thinking about, a lot of it is based on, you know, experiences and discussions I've personally had with people, you know, who are living in a lot of situations. They've informed how I'm thinking about just so much about what my advocacy is, you know, what I kind of stand for and what I kind of think are the best, you know, ways to do advocacy. And I think one of the greatest experiences I had was actually at a conference a few years ago. I met someone who was dealing with a lot of, you know, really intense compulsions. He was talking to me about it. And I was thinking, like, this guy is absolutely crazy. But I was like, look, let me take a step back and let me really try to be empathetic and see it from his perspective. And I was able to actually find myself in some of what he was talking about. And then years later, I started struggling with some of the similar things that he struggled with. But I remembered from my conversation that because I was able to be empathetic to him, I was then able to be empathetic to myself. And so I think just the ability this conference has had both to meet, you know, other, you know, people, you know, even Jewish people, you know, a lot of people from many, many different walks of life, that are like my own and as well different from my own in so many different ways, has really opened up my eyes and I think given me a very good perspective. And so I think that's something that I hope we can all work on, you know, bringing forward and really making a difference in that regard.
Well, quickly, I think I fall on the other side of the spectrum. I think it's it should be more centered for people living with OCD. I think it's a little bit too much centered around clinicians and the medical side, where I think the community does not have the same opportunities to have its voices heard in a collective arena. That is why I advocate for more community lived experience panels. I think too that it's too geared for young people. Everything is centered around children, young people, adults. When you get beyond that, you have a whole afterthought group of people that's being left out. That's older people. And I think I lost my thought. Yeah, I lost my thought. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. We'll come back to it. Because I think honestly what you said is relevant. It's speaking to kind of from your role and your experience, like what what your perspective is we hear the growth, you know, things, the accomplishments that have been made around advocacy and opportunity and content, but we also know that there's growth.
Yeah. And I was going to say real quick, I applaud everybody that's listening not to get caught up on the messengers, but to hear the message. You know, OCD does not care if you white, black, rich, or poor. We all need to collectively be heard. So,
thank you, Val. All right, who's next?
I just wanted to share as we're thinking about advocacy, an experience I had at the conference that was so special was I was at the IOCDF booth, and that was a really incredible opportunity to get front-facing time with members of our community and to hear from them directly. And I just wanted to say that one of the most inspiring things to me was folks who would come up to me and say, you know, this is my first time attending, and I was able to feel heard and seen by being here. And I hear all the time on our live streams, we talk about advocacy as, you know, it can be how you define it. And I think for some people, just showing up was a form of advocacy for them. And I just am so proud to be a part of offering that to people. And I think as we move forward, I think there's so much to consider and there's so many perspectives to listen to. And I just really strive as a staff member to continue to be listening and to hear those perspectives and to offer hope moving forward that we can continue to provide this avenue for folks to advocate in a way that feels manageable to them, to let them take that first step in their journey and to let them feel the advocacy and feel the community through that process.
I 1000% want to lift that up before we close with Ella. Ella, you get to close. I absolutely 1000 want to lift that up because I think there was the reason why I want to lift that up is because there was a person who who was in the audience and spoke at the panel, the BIPOC panel, and I think this is probably a lot of people's experience where they believe that you have to like be at a certain space in your treatment, or you got to be a certain way in order to be an advocate. And it's like, no. When I was going on my little rant earlier about your voice, no, your voice is important right now. So if there is something in your head that's telling you that you have to be a certain way in order to advocate for your needs, whatever that may be at this level, like, please dispel that. I'm here to give you permission to throw that thought out the door. Let it ride on past. It's on a bike, it's on a motorcycle. Let it ride on past. Because who you are today and what you bring to the table today is exactly what we need as we are seeking to meet the needs and allow and really practice what is meant when we talk about diversity, inclusivity. Like, we are trying to put that in practice, IOCDF, especially at this roundtable, that your voice is relevant right now. You don't have to be at a specific place in your treatment. You don't have to have figured everything out. Who the hell figured OCD out? I promise you it changes like every 5 seconds. So let's go with the nature of the space and say you are ready right now. So whatever platform you need to reach out and have your voice highlighted, heard, whoever you want to link up with to become an advocate, you are ready now. Now, we want to get through the anxiety because we know anxiety ain't friendly. But if you want to talk about anxiety, that's something different. We can talk about that. But as it relates to being in this community and speaking up for your needs and your wants, and from your own experience, feel like there's something to be said, please speak up. Please. Please. And if you need to be on this panel to do so, I invite you. Please reach out. So, all right, Ella, closing us out. Let's go.
Leave it to me to be the one to close out, and my thoughts are so tangled.
Do your very best. Just say it.
Honestly, I mean, I know I say this a lot, but, you know, as a young adult with OCD, kind of dealing with the gray zone that I am in, you know, I take it upon myself to sort of speak to as many other young adults with OCD as I possibly can, because it's something that everybody's struggling with, whether you struggled with it years ago or you're going through it now, you know. So I would just, as someone that likes to reach out to young adults, you know, I would just really, really like to see more support groups for young adults, but not just support groups. It might sound sort of strange, but you know, talks and conferences on how to deal with OCD in college. I mean, I had no idea how to deal with that at all. So sort of going forward, you know, that's something that I would really like to see, sort of broadening opportunities for young adults to thrive, because everybody has to go through it at some point, and it's very, very scary when you have no idea which way to go, you know. So I would just really love to see more of that in the future.
Wonderful. See, you did so well. Way to close out. So in closing, I want to first thank everybody for joining us. I appreciate all the commentary, all the comments. I hope we were able to practice and show up and model our agreements, meaning the agreements that we shared early on about making this a space and how, you know, we have varying perspectives, and, you know, this is a safe space for us to do that. I would say about perspective, as someone who's been around for quite a while, I will say IOCDF, I haven't identified a pattern, but Ella, when you made that statement, it made me realize that there have been cycles that IOCDF, the conference specifically, has gone through, where there was a whole initiative specifically for Spanish-speaking folks. I do know that we have like parceled out. There was like a DDD section, and there's like a young adult. Like, there were periods based on the conference that you attended where you saw all this happening. So I would encourage folks to hang around just hang around longer. We do recognize that it's slow growth, but I wonder if through this conversation and through this dialogue and through you all speaking up, where IOCDF has the opportunity to bring back around some of these topics, because I do remember there being like one on college. I remember there being one for like specifically for parents. So I think there's something to be said about just how things cycle through. And I encourage you to stay around and keep raising your voice about what you want to see, because I do know when those cycles come out, say this to the people on the panel too, when those cycles come around for submitting proposals and things like that, collaborate. Find a clinician, find a somebody, reach out, like, oh, I had a thought. So we can link up, pair up, and present what we want to see. Because sometimes we don't always want it to fall on our back, but sometimes that's where it falls, right? So I wanted to link that to my phrase about, like, you're ready now. For all the folks out there in the community, you're ready now. You're ready now to do a panel. You're ready now to do a talk. You're ready now to become an advocate. Ready now. We don't have anything to wait for. You're ready now. So if anybody interested, find my email. I'm out here. Ella, we need to get on it. We need to do a young adult something. You want it there?
Yeah,
let's make it happen.
You know me.
That's my
That's
plan.
right.
I have some ideas.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I feel like that's a beautiful, amazing way to close out the recap. We've talked about the content, we've talked about the advocacy, we've talked about the perspective. We even got some folks, hopefully you're thinking about how you want to show up next conference and maybe facilitate some of this stuff. And know that, again, IOCDF is not paying me for this. I am literally here as a moderator, facilitator. So when I speak, I am speaking surely from my advocacy space for Black people, and myself as a clinician who wants to advocate for the community. So this encouragement is because all the voices are living and important. And in my experience, IOCDF has been very receptive to constantly expanding. And yes, again, as in most spaces, the growth is slow, but we can be intentional, as Alex was saying. Let's be intentional. Let's use and stand behind solutions. I am a firm believer that advocacy and diversity is about action. So yes, we facilitated a dialogue around it. Let's move into action. Lift your voice, raise your voice, speak, share, find an email address, find a comment section. Get out here and do the work, y'all. There's plenty of work to be done. I promise you.
Like you say, let's
Thank
be
you all,
about
my
it.
wonderful. That's right. Thank you all, my wonderful panelists. With that, we've kept you all longer than we intended, but we appreciate you staying if you were able to hang around. And we will see you all time.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, everyone.